There's much work to be done, but mind, body, and spirit are up to the task. Without a doubt, I'm A-okay.
I don't know, dude.
Maybe there's more nobility in just giving up.
Physical media, stuff, plastic, more plastic. Are you perhaps a weeboo anime fan? Are you unable to find an outlet for that strong, raw affection you feel so dearly towards inexistent superior beings? Is consumerism the nearest viable option to let it out? Or is there something else? Does it go deeper? Hi, I'm Funebure.
That's not your name.
And something that keeps me up at night is insomnia. And the question of,
Why be weebos collecting?
and as someone who has had the need to live out of instant ramen for a month in order to buy some Figmas he doesn't need, I'm qualified to talk about this. But I'm not a collector, I'm just lonely. And if the answer is
Because they like it.
although a valid one, it's also wrong. And you should feel ashamed for answering in such a trivializing manner, even more for a subculture, which the vivid representation at the eyes of the rest of society is some guy dragging his waifu pillow through a parking lot in order to buy some ramune at the local Japanese supermarket. There has to be a more significant reason, so we need to dive deeper. And by deeper, I mean delimiting the topic of a video since I've been working on this since last September. So what's the deal with Weibo physical media and all that stuff? Am I hungry for answers? Or could this just be an excuse to complain about things that drives me nuts? I don't know. Who can tell? Why don't we find out?
Hopeless.
So last year, while rewatching some good old classics, I tried putting on my legal copy of Baka to test, but suddenly the inconveniences started piling up even more rapidly than any watch later list you could have. So I found myself torrenting it.
Funebure, we don't deal in absolutes, so we don't see piracy as a black and white subject. Hence, this won't be an argument hammering on it, not defending it. Although a complex subject, considering how convenient streaming services are by definition, in theory, plus arguments about how oversaturating the market with countless monthly subscriptions drives the consumer into dusting off their old hats and wooden legs to set sail to the seven seas. It's a conversation on its own, and one that has been addressed by countless more popular and better versed individuals. Nobody's mind is gonna be changed today.
Why am I even doing this? So, when playing a Blu Ray, first, the player starts nagging me that it needs constant updates to play a decade-old Blu-ray. Then, we go through a loading screen.
What?
Then, we get the classic FBI intro or some kind of warning.
Who is this FBI? What are they trying to warn us about?
Then, for this one example, we get the Media Factory logo, the Funimation logo. Then jump straight into the freaking trailers. During the trailers, you can't skip chapters, but you can jump straight into the menu. And yes, this differs from Blu-ray to Blu-ray. I've seen some that just won't let me jump into the menu without sitting through some bullshit. So you finally get there. Good job. Now you can gaze upon either a generic menu design with some clips playing in the background, or just a still image with an audio loop, but it's finally time to start watching your dear anime. It was out of these inconveniences where the idea for this video was born. For you see, any self-loading, respected weeble will partake in the ritual of taking screen caps or getting clips from his favorite moments, either to meme it out or to hoard it in some hard drive. A right which I was denied for committing the crime of buying some anime. You know how DVDs with their menus and extra features seemed like a clear step up from VHS? Well, it seems like nobody cares with Blu-rays, even more when we have players like MPD where the bar is so high that seems like Blu-rays actually make an attempt to be as unfriendly as possible.
At Funebure, we are aware that Papa OG James Rolfe did a video about these inconveniences many a moon ago, listing all of them in a better detail as many others for sure.
Aside from the mentioned inconveniences, you can't take screenshots. Well, it's not impossible, but it's quite the hassle thanks to that pesky DRM, which makes things difficult as well for streaming services.
Why didn't you watch it on Crunchyroll though?
The moment you make piracy more convenient than paying for content, people are gonna pirate.
So even when Baka to Test seems to not be available for streaming, the only other reason I see to pop up a good old disc in will be for the extra content, right?
It's always very basic.
Yeah.
There was a time when expecting extra content on your DVD was a given. Behind the scenes, breakups, commentary, etc. But with anime, extra content usually goes as far as a clean OP and ED or trailers. So even count the fucking menu as an extra feature.
Which includes the movie and chapter selections.
That's depressing.
You know how in the land of the rising sun, anime is sold in multiple volumes, containing a couple of episodes each with some extra features, and the last volume and probably the middle one you'll get an OVA, and if there is a demand for that title, they'll release a box set, bundle, etc. There are exceptions of course, but outside Nippon we usually get a lackluster full series box with no extra content, unless you count the OVAs as extras. But if you're buying the so-called full series, isn't it a given that you expect that as a baseline?
A Funebure, the voices are aware that the more popular shows may receive the multiple volume treatment outside Nippon, although the extra content in those may vary due to multiple legal reasons, so it's not always the same as their Japanese counterparts. Also, although one of the best type of extra content are commentary tracks, we would rather hear from the original staff rather than the dubcast. At Funebure, the Void Lords admire and respect the craft of voice acting, but we're not interested in the dubcast commentary tracks. The Void Lords will rather hear from the main creating force and leave the dubbing cast inside only if we can have the original ones. We only want cool extra content.
God freaking darn it. Anime movies. They seem to get a better treatment in the extra content department, which makes sense considering the content length in the disc compared to a series. But making sense from the production or marketing perspective doesn't make a product appealing, even less when you can watch both the episodes and creditless openings and endings on streaming services. When you consider that, buying a DVD with the bare minimum stops making sense as a product, doesn't it?
Well, you're not entitled to have an extra content. You're already getting the series, which takes effort to bring to you. You should appreciate that before asking more.
I mean, in an ideal world, the product is supposed to prove itself to us, so that we decide to spend our money on it.
Now, when remastering lost media, old rare OVAs or films, that in itself makes the existence of a Blu Ray worth the price. But even then, extra content about the remastering process could be interesting enough as a tasty cherry for that already delicious cake. But what about modern shows, your seasonals? I'm mainly focusing on more recent ones. It's hard not to wonder about what's the appeal of buying them when some of them won't offer anything extra compared to what you get from streaming services and are just tedious to play. Sure, some amp up the visuals here and there. Oh, we'll get into that barely. So it's just being able to display them on your shelf.
Oh, that sounds pretty good.
I wish there was a Criterion Collection counterpart for anime. Cool extras, no bullshit, a celebration to each film in the collection. They are, most of the time, the ultimate version to own the film in a tidy package. With the convenience of streaming services, I would expect physical media to strive to provide the ultimate experience for its content, which is clearly not the case, but hey, at least they have the uncensored versions, right? Outside the gimmick it already is, how much should the uncensored aspect be considered as extra content?
Here still! I need those unfucked up by physics, goddarn it!
Then we have those studios who make visual improvements from the broadcast version to the Blu Ray release, which could spawn its own conversation. How far is a change welcomed before it feels like a detriment? But as the superficial beings we are, if the insides are not good enough, we can still be swayed in by the outside. Such as the cover art. An art on its own, there's nothing like popping a bad boy out and saying,
Yes, that's a nice cover indeed.
We shouldn't have much of an issue here since they are usually localized versions from the Japanese original covers, but there still can be some misses. Pamphlets with useful information or art, instead of just advertising other shows when they come with small art books or production materials.
Now that's the good stuff.
CD labels. Although some may prefer a minimalistic approach, like a logo uniformly across multiple discs with different colors, I really prefer to have a parade showing the characters or some theme related to the series. Also, making it easier to identify the content on the disc instead of thinking, oh yeah, it was the orange one, wasn't it? Minimalism not always brings that much needed delicacy for physical media. The spine. Oh yes, the spine. Probably the aspect of most importance since without it, we will collapse, since it's mainly what you'll see for the rest of your days, while it sits and gathers dust in your bookshelf, being the reason that they need to be something kino, something popping, instead of something lame that hides the charm of the series. Now, coming with an illustration that represents the series is a tall task. Most of the previous points apply to books as well, and a much welcome factor is when they play bouncing off with finished artwork and their sketches. Those are the details that make the forthcoming months of starvation worth your while. But it is hard to strike all of those points. Sometimes you get a middle ground, while some other times you just get a crack on the head for buying them.
The Ultimate Edition DVD. What's the difference?
As with any and every other market, we have multiple versions for the same things. Limited editions, reprints, volumes, full sets, value versions, reissue, repackage.
Why do you have all those?
But products need to differentiate themselves in order for us to express our individuality by buying shit. And for that, we have the stuff that comes with special editions, just like those ship trinkets that come with collector's editions. Although there can be some cool ones here and there, but usually are things like keychains, photo print, a tacky badge, and stickers. I don't like stickers. Oh, look at this collector item that goes straight into the trash can. They're just there padding up the contents. But I like useful stuff like guitar picks, bookmarks, and thematic useful stuff.
It's a gift to the world.
One of my favorite ways to add value to a box set, a good art book, is always nice. But if you just have a book with screen captures and episode descriptions, no, very bad. I want to see some Genga sketches, storyboards, production material overall. Cool special boxes. Imaginary boxes are cool, although I'm not a fan of those tall boxes. They fuck up my bookshelf. But I really like the design on these ones. But if you're going to have a special box, I'd rather something more thematic, cute, and useful. Something that fits well with the rest. Then we have the cursed editions, like those safe editions. Why will anybody buy these versions instead of just streaming it? It's not like they will help your bookshelf with their unremovable hideous sleeves. Au contraire, they scream from your bookshelf. Look at this peasant who bought me. They look so freaking bland, while they should be aiming to tell the world,
Hey, anime is a thing that has everything you can imagine as its waifu counterpart. So come and take a deep dive into depression.
Getting a release that flawlessly nails these points feels like getting the bee's knees of consumerism, a celebration to anime itself, to this series which, if you're getting, you must be somehow attached to, which makes it worth spending your cash in it, rather than wanting to bang your head in concrete for getting it. Even those that fall in a middle ground are good enough to satisfy. So my point is not Blu Ray bad, it's just Blu Ray could be something exquisite to look forward to, rather than something where we force ourselves to appreciate what we got. At least it has a menu.
At least it has subtitles.
Rather than being excited for getting a detailed full package. And sure, many of these aspects may be mainly preference, a matter of taste, of being biased, being a boomer, or not being wrong. Books. I think that everybody can agree that the physical, palpable reading experience cannot be replaced by its digital counterpart. The texture of books covers, the feel of flipping through pages, the smell of a new book, the smell of an old book, their gentle touch, caress, the feel of gripping a book from behind.
Now that's the good stuff. At Blu Ray, we appreciate friendly platforms like Shonen Plus, where you can freely read things like Chainsaw Man and Spy Family as it comes out, and see it as an aspect which makes it more endearing to want to get those volumes when available, to pay homage to those stories and imagery you've been enjoying. But at Funebure, we will never forgive them for what they did to Chainsaw Man's cover art with that hideous logo.
A further reason to appreciate having a legal, easy-to-access way to try this series is that I don't take risks like that. I never buy something I know nothing about, and when I do buy something, rarely, when possible, I only buy things I'm already invested in, either finished consuming or in the middle of, mainly paying tribute to those titles that brought some colors to the everyday shades of grey. I know this may not be the case for some, which are a minority as shown in this graph, and I've only done that a couple of times, which was more of a souvenir.
Poor decision.
Still, for me, books don't require such a harsh justification while considering buying them, unlike DVDs and figurines. And as with everything, we have our reprints, X editions, box sets, etc. Although some bless your bookshelf provided a more distinct aesthetic by being more serious or balancing colors between volumes. There's nothing worse than changes made during a print run of something you are collecting, or those little imperfections that scream at you every time you look at your bookshelf. But how can we forget the most exquisite art books? Those delicious books. As we know, a proper art book composition is an art of its own, and here are some of the things I look forward to enjoy when scrolling through a new one. Does the art has room to breathe? How dense or cluttered is the materials? There's nothing more tragic than art worthy of a full page being confined into a poor corner. Is the background color accentuating the art? Does it draw you in? Does it invite you to both the world in the artwork and the process of its creation? Is the focus of the book to show how much work was done rather than the art itself? Is the provided insight of interest and value or just self-gratification? Are the pages dominated by text instead of presenting the information in support of the art itself? Does it share different stages of the art piece's creation? Is it playful with different materials for special art pieces, or does it have foldable pages? Now, Aero Artbooks know what your heart really desires. You can tell how seriously they take the composition, pieces in their full page glory, different materials to play with the transition from innocence to erotica.
Who put this in here? Oh, silly paper. Seriously though, who put this in here?
Or one of my favorites being when they release a special edition for a manga or art book composed of just the sketches for such works, the name, if you will. Artbooks, so relaxing. The Hisamakuras of physical media. Then, if you delve into such depths, the collector's depths, there's the issue of which version from which region are you getting your loot from. There are some differences that may seem more appealing from other parts of the world. Like, did you know that seemingly all Japanese books come with dust jackets? Which is not the case with Western books, especially not with their manga counterparts. And did you know that they are referred as jaketto and appear on multiple categories such as... And did you know that originally they had the purpose of protecting the book's cover, but now their roles are mainly decoration and advertising, but the obi, which is the paper that goes around the book at the bottom, goes way harder on the advertising. And did you know that the folding part is called sote and usually has further information about the book? I do appreciate it when they extend the cover in order to keep it as part of the design on their Western counterpart. But did you know that this becomes part of the collector's value for the overall book, which can be a detriment since they receive most of the damage, which was their purpose to begin with, so now you need a sleeve for your sleeve. But did you know that some artists get really creative, taking this in mind with what they can achieve by bouncing between the cover and the dust jacket, from having the sketch inside the jacket, or a more gratuitous version like some magazines do, or making a new art piece altogether just to flex their muscles. And have you noticed how every Japanese book you buy comes with this little non-kawaii divider bookmark? But did you know that some Western publishers like Faku keeps the dust jacket as a one-to-one replica, which is pretty neat? And did you know that some are really lame and are just a black and white version of the cover? Look, I love you, anime, and manga, and Gurugamesh. But why don't you love me back?
For good products
that pander to my unprofitable taste. While getting older, I still find some excitement on finding those details I rambled about, be it in a new book or a Blu Ray, or learning about details while stepping into the land of ridiculously expensive figurines. That feeling of a kid opening a present, one that you bought for yourself, to escape from the horrors of adulthood, taxes, while feeding the clockwork of capitalism. Oh, but we can't escape feeling Setsuboy when some releases just come with the bare minimum, just like those B-movies that desperately try to reach the 80-minute mark just so that they can be called a feature film. Also, why isn't Asobi Asobase available in Blu Ray yet? The world is ending, and my bookshelf is still waiting for some titles to bless it with their presence in the future, when all's well, which, in the end, that's what bookshelves are. They are more than a bunch of pages and boxes and plastic gathering dust.
What a fucking waste!
But altars of pure love for a medium that brings something special to our lives. An altar with books of revelations from a cult of love. And as usual, one that seeks to keep the masses in control with symbols and signs and frame designs, while keeping the poor poor. And that's why we shouldn't buy anything. Renounce to our title of consumerists. And why capitalism is bad. And... oh god, what was this video about again? If you like this, subscribe. Actually, you don't even have to like this. Just subscribe. How hard is it? You have nothing to lose, so you should. You coward. Fits my ego since I don't make a fraction of a yen from this. My payment is you watching this. Do you hate me that much that you'd rather make me and my ego starve? So, what do you think? Right? You little shit. I got a mouth fascination for collectors. I got a mouth fascination for collectors. Oh, what do you find all that time? I bless for everything in the house. I got a mouth fascination for collectors.